We are really happy that we are hosting tonight the book presentation of Feminist Infrastructural Critique. It is a cooperation with the Department of Art and Education of the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna. I will give the word now to Elke Krasny, who is one of the editors of the book and who will do the moderation of the book presentation tonight. And yeah, thank you.
So good evening, everyone. We are really happy to be hosted at Depot. Thank you, Dominic, for moderating and letting people know that we are devoting this evening to feminist infrastructural critique. I want to acknowledge and thank all the students from the Academy of Fine Arts who are here tonight. It's really amazing to see the Depot filled, like to the last seat. It's fantastic. And I also want to acknowledge everyone who is present online and joining, because since pandemic times, Depot is offering this other infrastructural space that makes it possible for people who cannot come here because they are not able to come here, or because they are far away and cannot just travel for one night, to actually join us. So I will let you know a little bit what the program is for tonight, so you know what to expect. There's 5 of us. We should have been 6, but Ineš Moreira from Porto couldn't be with us because she is unwell. And so the 5 of us, we will be speaking for roughly an hour. There will be an introduction to the, it's not a book, it's a journal, and it's online, so it's never been printed. So we are doing a presentation of something that you can only find online. So there is no physical object that we have to show. And so Sophie and I, together with Claudia, edited this journal, which is an issue of FKV. That's the only and thus also oldest feminist art history journal that is peer-reviewed in the German-speaking context. And they invite issues that are in German language, but also issues that contain contributions that are only in English. So Claudia, Sophie, and myself, we edited this, and Sophie and I will be the ones to introduce you to the journal. What are the aims? How did it come about? So that will be roughly 10 to 15 minutes, and then the 3 other people, Merve, who is sitting next to me and who traveled here from Amsterdam, Urška, who is sitting next to Merve, and she traveled to Vienna from Ljubljana, and Claudia, who traveled here from the IKL, will be giving also presentations, roughly 15 minutes, and then we have half an hour for more formal conversations, sharing of reflections, concerns, questions, remarks, and then, of course, as you know, the cafe outside is very happy for people to also drink something there, so that the cafe will also be there in the future. And then conversations can continue outside. So when we think about art, art making, art history, infrastructure may not be the first thing that comes to mind. But in recent years, there has been a turn to infrastructure across many different fields and disciplines. So not just engineers and architects and policy makers and urban planners and urban developers are now thinking about infrastructure, but across the humanities and across art practices and curating, there has been a lot of work on infrastructures. And this special issue came about. It actually has a history that is connected to the Academy of Fine Arts. So 2 of my colleagues, Sabet Buchmann and Martin Beck, they reached out, and during a time when they were preparing an exhibition on infrastructure and also a book, and they asked me if there were students' works that could be exhibited and included in their exhibition. And I knew that already a number of works had been suggested. And so what I proposed to them was not there are 2 more seats up front here. Okay. So what I suggested to them was to have a symposium by PhD students, so not something to exhibit, but a discursive event that would share with people from the work of ongoing dissertation work that actually looked at infrastructures, worked with infrastructures, critiqued them, but hadn't necessarily made the point that infrastructure was already addressed in the work. So what Sabet and Martin made me realize is how many of the dissertations I supervise are actually concerned with infrastructural concerns without having made that a topic. So that was very important to understand. And then after this symposium, Sophie and Claudia and I continued to have conversations that this is really an interesting theme, should be explored more, how particularly feminist and queer feminist approaches to infrastructure should be developed further, understood better, and also understood through practice. Not just through theories, but in a way through practices. So we then started a conversation with the editors of this FKV, which I really recommend to also check out all the other issues. They're all online. It's a very good resource for people who are doing research in the context of critical art history. And the FKV editors, they said, yeah, okay, go ahead, do a special issue on this. So we had a call for papers, but we also reached out to people whom we know, whose work we were interested in, and also some of the PhD students wrote contributions for this special issue. So I just described that at length in order to also explain a little bit how publications come about and how they bring together voices from different geographies, but also voices at very different stages in their academic careers, at different stages in their practices, and with different interests, one could say. So what an issue can do is hold all this together, which is in a way what infrastructure does. I mean, if it doesn't fail, if it doesn't break down, it holds things together. And the ways in which infrastructure holds things together not only requires a lot of organizing and preparing and maintenance, but it also comes with implications. So the ways in which we are held together by infrastructure comes with certain norms, with expectations, with ways in which bodies are made to behave, required to correspond to what the infrastructure requires them to do. So these are all concerns that we were interested in. And we have a very long subtitle, which is maybe even more important than the main title. So, Life-Affirming Practices Against Capital. And it came later. So we were already way into working with the contributions we had received, and the more we studied them and had conversations with the people who had written these texts, we came to understand that critique in this context wasn't just about critical theory, understood in this sense of Frankfurter Schule, and understanding how one approaches things critically in order to analyze their conditions and what these conditions do to human and non-human life. But we also understood that these practices were actually transformative, that they tried to inhabit and use infrastructures in ways maybe not foreseen, or build infrastructures of one's own, and not undoing infrastructures in the sense of getting rid of them, and also not saying now we are taking over all the water infrastructure and the responsibility for it, but inhabiting infrastructures differently, resistantly, sometimes also gently and joyfully. And so against capital, which are the last 2 words in this subtitle, also addresses that infrastructures by and large, since modernity, have very much operated in the interest of economic regimes. So when you think historically, all economic regimes have been reliant on infrastructures, and we could say the infrastructures let us understand how the economies work, what their interests are, and so in a way, of course, infrastructure is also always a lens to understand how capital works. I already said before that all the different contributions, and Sophie will speak about that more, are held together by coming from practice. So most of the people writing either are practitioners, so practicing artists, curators, architects, landscape architects, urbanists, or they are theory people who also do have a practice or work very closely with practitioners. And together in their writing, they contribute to what is called theory or reflection, or the production of a body of written work, to put it more generally. Do we have time that I read from the... Yeah. What do you think? Okay. So I also want to read like the first two paragraphs to also give you a sense of what the motivations were and how an approach or a motivation then leads to something more than the original motivation in a certain way. So feminist infrastructural critique is dedicated to understanding how infrastructure impacts on the condition of life and the planet. Today, bodies, minds, feelings, and spirits of living and sentient beings, including human beings, as well as environments and resources, are fully infrastructuralized. Infrastructure includes all kinds of essential infrastructure, and you may remember that essential infrastructure and essential care and essential work was something that was very much discussed during the pandemic, when things were understood as essential for life, survival, and survivance. So infrastructure includes all kinds of essential infrastructure, technological and digital infrastructure, as well as social and caring infrastructures. We are all living with infrastructures, so this is not by our choice, but we are living with infrastructures, which most of the time are not ours in the sense that we ourselves have neither developed nor constructed them, but also not decided over their making. Feminist infrastructural critique manifests through use and inhabitation, as much as through new imaginaries and critical theories. Feminist infrastructural critique manifests through an insistence on care, repair, and maintenance, as well as through resistance, refusal, protest, or sometimes attack. Through practices of use and resistance, new infrastructural imaginaries come alive in order to overcome infrastructural oppression, violence, and discrimination. Daily infrastructural labors are at the heart of feminist infrastructural critique and new infrastructural imaginaries. So this is the first paragraph that I wanted to share with you. And I will jump to the third paragraph in order to also point out that there was very important work in the context of the art world that beyond what was happening at the academy that I explained at the beginning, that there is a number of years now of engagement with infrastructure. In 2016, Bergen Assembly, so Bergen in Bergen, Norway, so that's the city where Triennale is taking place. Bergen Assembly, a triennial international art event dedicated to new formats of artistic engagement and public events in the city of Bergen, used infrastructure as the keyword and wrote the following. By looking at many different understandings of this keyword, from legacies of colonial and early capitalist systems of governance to current conditions of the financialization of the cultural field to the otherwise, to the subversive, to the subversive possibilities of thinking and working with infrastructures at sites of affect and contradictions, infrastructure emerges as the invisible force of manifest culture today. So what we picked up on is the invisible force, how a lot of infrastructure only becomes visible or noticed when it doesn't work, or when it forces people to do what they do not want to do. And what we wanted to make visible is actually the kinds of works that make it possible to use these infrastructures in different ways, but also to understand how to work collectively for other ways of inhabiting them. And I think I'll stop here, and I will give the word to Sophie.
Thank you. Hello. You might have found on your seats small cards, and I just want to let you know, if you want to read into the journal already, you can use the QR code and follow, for instance, what Elke just said in the introduction. And I will also start now with something that has also to do with the introduction of this issue, and I think it starts on page 11, if somebody really wants to follow. Because when we, so I'm going to read. While engaging with the different contributions and their approaches to feminist infrastructural critique, we came to realize that in addition to our table of contents and its narration, multiple relationships between the 14 contributions could be developed further. So you can also see the names of all the authors on the back. So we started working on something like text clusters, in addition to the table of contents, to pay closer attention to these relationships and the meaningful connections. This work found its way in our introduction, where it is called Reading Paths. And as I said, it's on page 11 where it starts. And by organizing and arranging the texts along 3 main reading paths, we want to underline that feminist infrastructural concerns are shared and connected across sites, in different localities, and with different approaches. And hopefully, these reading paths can be of help for people who want to work with the journal in whatever way, like be it in teaching, in art education, but of course also in research and hopefully also many other fields. And I will now read to you the 3 reading paths, so you might get an idea. The first one is titled Basic Needs and Political Rights, and it focuses on the relationships between the texts along categories like infrastructures for nourishment and hospitality, infrastructures for health and reproductive justice, infrastructures for the right to exist and appear in public space, and infrastructures for knowing otherwise. And the second reading path is titled Sites and Conditions, and rearranges the texts along shared matters like public sites and squares, gardens and plantations, domestic infrastructures, kitchens and tables, former industrial sites and mines, production and transport, borders, digital infrastructure, community infrastructure. And the third reading path is titled Elements and Nature, arranging the text along concerns like air, water, earth, animals, and plants. And to add to this, to give you some idea on the multiple locations that are part of the journal and all the different essays that are there, I want to share with you the locations, yeah. So there are plantations and gardens in the Seychelles, the Brazilian Amazon, seed vaults and research centers in Norway, Lebanon, Syria, and Morocco, pre-colonial, colonial, and decolonial dimensions of domestic labor in Puerto Rico, squares and streets in Buenos Aires, hosting displacement and marginalization in Venice, Brussels, and Nablus, Gaziantep and the Turkish-Syrian border. We will hear about it more a little bit later. And here in Vienna, artworks in public space, the online encyclopedia Wikipedia, physical urban realms at night, infrastructures under pressure in Slovakia, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Germany, Slovenia, sorry, Germany and Hungary, urban infrastructures for neuroqueer and neurodiverse publics, and Pakistan's Indus River Delta.
You know, there are those moments that you think that you should have just taken a picture of this and use it as your presentation rather than the slides themselves. So these are like my notes for the 10 minutes that I'm going to talk to you with. My name is Merve Bedir. I'm an architect and from Ankara, from Middle East Technical University, and currently living quite nomadic actually. And a bit all over the place, let's put it that way. Easiest way to start talking without getting too much into the biography. I'm super happy to be part of this publication. All of the people in the publication are inspirations and people that I try to think with. So it's really special, and I thank a lot to the editors for contributing to it. And the other thing I have to say is that in addition to the people that I mentioned, that I just referred to in the case of the journal that I think with, and there are also people that I think with who cannot be here, or who think with and act with or practice with, who can't be here, that are the members of the kitchen workshop that you see the logo of. It's an initiative based in Gaziantep in Turkey, and I'm really, I have to acknowledge each of them. Here I'm going to speak, let's say you will be hearing my voice, but it's actually inevitably also from this collective place. So sometimes when I say my words, they're not just my words. But also I don't mean that I'm representing them, I'm speaking on my behalf, but from this collective place. So I have to emphasize that. And I also acknowledge that many of them, that they cannot be here because of Fortress Europe, because of the unjust migratory movement regimes that are also part of those infrastructures that we are talking about. So I'm actually privileged that I'm sharing about the collective here. I will try not to get too much into what is written in the publication. You can read it later, you can read it now. And I will try to just give you a brief overview of where the writing comes from. And also I have to say that I'm an architect, but everything that's written in the piece actually comes from this accumulation and the intersection of different ways that I practice. So it comes from reading, researching, curating, participating, acting, performing, designing, teaching, learning. You know, it comes from all of these places, and it's really at the intersection of all of these places. The reason I'm saying this is also because part of the things that led to the kitchen workshop is things that I earned my life from. And a lot of the ways that I'm participating in the kitchen workshop is actually completely voluntary. So what you hear here is, you might be hearing about, from a disciplinary perspective, you might be hearing me as someone who is, you know, nomadic. You might be hearing me as citizen, non-citizen, migrant, you know, someone who is seeking questions of belonging, home, place, placelessness, and so on and so forth. So with that, I will tell you a little bit about the place. So I will go place, performance, or the site, let's say, the entity, agency, and also then I will make a few notes on infrastructure and I will finish. So the site is determined by this border, and this border is the nation-state border between Turkey and Syria. And this concrete wall was built with the watchtowers that you see. It was built with the war. Well, I shouldn't say with the war, starting with the revolution in Syria, and then in the aftermath of the civil war and the migration. It's a 600-kilometer wall, if I'm not mistaken, concrete, made with like precast concrete blocks. Pistachio trees, fig trees, and olive trees on one side, especially on on Syria side, and then minefields on Turkey side. And these minefields come from previous conflicts, not just actually not from the recent conflicts in the region. And you already see the buffer zone here, actually, between the two walls. So this buffer zone is where the minefields are. And the landscape here that you see on this side, on the right-hand side, is actually the landscape that is, you know, naturally the landscape of the region. And then this then becomes the ordinary view, let's say. Photos belong to Kemal Vural Tarla, who is part of the kitchen workshop of also. What is the landscape of olive trees is matched with watchtowers and other infrastructures of separation, segregation. And you see migrants, actually. This is a photo from 2014, and the series that you will see are from 14-15, when was the most intense time of migration from Syria towards Turkey and Europe also. And this dominant view of the landscape, what should have been everywhere, and how it becomes patches of landscape. And what is let's say, the leftover of migration, or the ruins of migration, the unnamed cemeteries of unnamed people, or camps, refugee camps, or migrant camps, or in Turkey they would be called hospitality centers, that sit with dams and rivers and borders and whatnot. Another aspect of is undocumented labor. A lot of migrants coming in, either not finding a place, working in seasonal labor, or ending up in the refugee camp. And actually there's a beginning of this story where we do talk about colonial infrastructures physically. This picture is from Berlin-Baghdad rail line. It's an infrastructure that was developed by the German and the Ottoman empires that has completely failed. And actually, according to some historians, this is the infrastructure that caused the First World War to happen. the one that was started by the German Ottoman versus the one that was started by the British and the French, which both of which were trying to reach out to Basra towards, through what is now called the Middle East, and the conflict of these two infrastructures led to the First World War. And the important thing about this infrastructure is that it also defines the nation-state borders in the region now. So between Turkey and Syria, between Turkey and Iraq, a lot of these borders are actually determined almost at the imprint of these colonial infrastructures that have failed. In some places you really see that it was a dismantling of the infrastructure, and in some places that the railroad was being built and it didn't work out. And the war started. So this image is a map of the region where Aleppo and Gaziantep, where the kitchen workshop is, can be seen in the same map. So Gaziantep, where I work now, or where the kitchen workshop was part of Aleppo during the Ottoman times. So it was actually a periphery district of the Aleppo region, district or region or city in Ottoman times, and now Aleppo is a city in the north of Syria, and Gaziantep is a city in the south of Turkey. This image is made collectively, well, I guess I should say that I drew it in the end as this one image because it ended up in an exhibition, but it was made collectively as a separate representation of another understanding of infrastructure. So the first one that I'm talking about in relation to the physical one, the Berlin-Baghdad rail line, and how it now became the definition of the defining factor of the nation-state borders, which also became the infrastructure of citizenship, being a citizen of Turkey, being a citizen of Syria, being a citizen of here or there. Here we were looking for a different way of defining our belonging to a certain place. So kitchen workshop is started by women from Syria, Turkey, and Kurdistan, and it's actually it is a collective entity. I'm not going to get into, let's say, the ethics or the principles of work or ethics or principles of being together, which is something we can discuss later if you want it. I'm happy to have conversations on that. But we were trying to understand our sense of belonging to the space through this defining our togetherness and our relations to each other through inhabiting this place and through inhabiting our connection to each other and what lies in the essence of that. And this is how it ended up as this image. In the center, what you see is certain words and concepts that came up from the conversations, and they sit very much in this landscape that define the borders, but then also the principles that construct this relationship. And I have to say, so maybe just a few words from the site to this entity, to this collectivity. The reason, I mean, the way that the women came together, the way that we came together, it happened very, very much organically. So there were several conversations that were taking place in a cultural center called Kultur, based in Gaziantep. And we were gathering as women, mostly talking about shared traumas, shared issues, violence in public space, violence by men towards women in public space, issues that women share in general, and so on and so forth. And I also have to say that, you know, so the departure point was this, and not necessarily to become a kitchen. And this kind of exercise also have evolved over time and found itself to become this different map, this alternative map, or this alternative ID, let's say, if I am to speak about this drawing as an ID. And yeah, I mean, then where the idea of citizenship comes into this story, which is my contribution to this issue, is where when we are looking for this idea of, I mean, when we are mapping or talking or conversing about this collective belonging and through shared conversations or through actually our disagreements also, not necessarily only agreements or what is shared, but also what is not shared. We come to the point of finding this law, certain law that exists in the municipality law, which defines citizenship, so it's with a Y instead of the I of the citizenship, where basically it defines a certain belonging and responsibility of living in a city. And this was interesting because this law has never been used, has never been, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but it has been unseen, overlooked, unmobilized, static, non-existent almost, even if it was in the law. So what we did was actually to mobilize this idea of citizenship, which existed in the law already. So with that, what does it mean to belong to a city? What does it mean to share a city? What kind of responsibility does it bring to us? And in this case, also taking the idea of city not as Gaziantep only, but also Aleppo. And this, you know, thinking of this map again, in a way. But then also making it this into this other map also. This is the first group that have started the kitchen workshop. Many of them actually live in different places now. These are a few examples from our gatherings. This one is about music. Other conversations, something about bread, something about food. I'm not going to get into the details of this one, these ones. On the left is the cultural center. Oh, sorry. Mutfak means kitchen workshop. Yeah, mutfak means kitchen and kitchen workshops. That when I use the words interchangeably, I'm actually talking about the same thing. I'm going to, I mean, these I won't get into the details too much, but maybe I will play this. And while this is playing,
زيتون حواش الموسم من قلب الشجر الزيتون الإدلبة.
While this is playing, I will do a little bit on the. I actually wanted you to watch her to pick the olives. It's also olive times, and yesterday we were talking. This is a video that you can find online. It's about olive oil in the region between Gaziantep and Aleppo, and the olive collecting practice and how it relates to the kitchen workshop also. But I will say just a few things just to conclude. And this is the part on infrastructure and the relationship to the journal, to the issue. I've been writing down all the words that I've been listening or reading in advance. There is things about care, repair, maintenance, resistance, refusal, protest, attack, relearning, interpreting, reusing, and also domains of infrastructure: legal, physical, social, ecological, digital. In all of this, I was thinking, if we are to think of infrastructure today, it really comes down to who owns infrastructure, who owns infrastructure, who makes infrastructure, and the fact that infrastructures are not neutral. They are not equal. They are not for everyone. They are exclusive. They are for the people who made them. Then there's the thing about care depending on infrastructure. And I couldn't agree with this more. And then there was the note about emotional investment, which is about love and rage, and love and rage and other parts of emotional investment to what makes infrastructure possible. And in my case, I guess the way that I am involved in the emotional infrastructure of the kitchen workshop is really through that love and rage, and that is the part that that I cannot translate to any economy, any capitalistic way of understanding economy. And in that sense, maybe it is important to emphasize that I totally the way to understand infrastructure in this case is through violence, oppression, and discrimination. And in this context, if there is a way to read it from a feminist perspective, it would be that, the one that goes outside against, you know, we can, I guess, put different words for it, but the one that is patriarchal, the one that is colonial, the one that is racist, the one that is discriminatory, the one that is territorial, the one that is exclusive, the one that is exploitative, extractive, and capitalist. So feminist infrastructures, if there is a way to look into it, is really, you know, all of these, to me, they do define the one that is patriarchal, colonial, and capitalist. I don't know what to do with the modernist and capitalist, actually, but maybe that's a discussion to articulate more. They do require more articulation. But then the feminist ones are really more with maintenance, with care, with repair, and with restoration. And I mean, there is the emphasis on. Elke mentioned the Bergen Assembly, which is where actually one of the inspirations also come from for me, where Irit Rogov talks about spectral infrastructures and the unarchivable and the unseen. So this notion, citizenship with a Y, it is actually in the law. So it's not, we are not bringing it new. It's nothing. We are not rediscovering. I mean, we are not discovering the world. We are not finding a new planet. It is something in the law. So we are just bringing it back, you know, or we are just revealing it. So this is an important thing to emphasize. Or people like Abdulmalik Simon, who talk about people as infrastructure. So, you know, people who need to be acknowledged. Or Laurent Berland, who talk about movement as the one that to emphasize on infrastructure rather than the institution. So again, like, and the infrastructure is actually about access, what makes something accessible, and through that we look at infrastructure. And yeah, I mean, maybe the last thing is to say where in this case how to think on infrastructure is really the one to put in the intersection of the disciplinary, the non-disciplinary, the one that comes from belonging, and the one that comes from practice and research also. And collective action, maybe, lastly, to emphasize. I think with that, I will stop. I hope it wasn't too long. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will continue with a very different story, but it relates nicely with how you ended, Merve, with the collective action. So my name is Urška Jurman. I come from Ljubljana, Slovenia. I will present you a project of a community garden from Ljubljana. And in the publication that we are presenting it's a small contribution as part of a collective article of the group called Ecologies of Care that Elke Krasny and me initiated during the COVID. And some members of the group Ecologies of Care, we participated in this publication with a joint article contribution presenting different sites and our work upon these sites under the title Infrastructures Under Pressure, Practicing with Sites of Struggle. So the project started 14 years ago, ended 2 years ago. The initiators I was part of the initiators. It's an art and cultural group from Ljubljana, involving 4 people beside me, Stefan Debner, Polonca Laušin and Apolonia Šuštaršić, all artists and architects, and myself, I don't know, I present myself as a cultural worker on different levels. So we started as part of one cultural festival with the support of a cultural institution from the neighborhood and with the support of the municipality of Ljubljana, which is the owner of this plot. But it all started with noticing. First, yes, we noticed this abandoned piece of land in the middle of a residential area close to the main train station, not far away from the old city center. And as a group, we share interest in critical spatial practices. We were basically curious. What is happening here? Like, why this piece of land is abandoned, fenced off, so what is the reason behind? So we went into exploring, gathering information about the ownership. We found out that the city of Ljubljana is owner of the land, about the history, and while gathering this information, also through the communication with the people living around, we were also actually all the time thinking about how we could somehow change, how we can actually transform this long fenced off site in the middle of a residential neighborhood into a space that is socially and environmentally meaningful. And actually how a long fenced off plot of land can be considered a piece, can be transformed out of consideration as a piece of real estate, you know, just waiting for better times to be sold. So how to transform this consideration of this land as an infrastructure for the capitalist production of space into a social and ecological infrastructure. What also the publication that we are talking today about actually discusses as caring infrastructure. So I mentioned we started as part of cultural festival with the support of cultural institution, which is really well embedded in this neighborhood. They have a very strong program that reaches out into the neighborhood, involving diverse communities. And at that year, 2010, they had part of this cultural festival focused really on green and social spaces in the neighborhood. So we approached them, and luckily they were interested to support us. And what you see on this image is actually our first meeting with people living around. We just basically presented our very vague, like very abstract idea at that time, how to bring different value and purpose and use to this land. And invited people to climb up this ladder that you see on the image, and just imagine like how they can imagine this place to be differently used. So we got first permission to use the space for 2 weeks during the festival, but we also knew from our previous experiences, because we did some projects already, like in and related to urban context, public space, that then it will be much easier to prolong. And at the end, we were prolonging this temporary use of space for 12 years, each year anew. So first when, we had to make an entrance to be able to enter. And when we entered, we really felt like somehow very careful guests, like temporary guests and temporary caretakers of this place. And we wanted to learn where we came to. And we invited this man, you see, who is like self-taught expert on wild plants, to learn with him actually what is already growing on this site, because through actually exchanges with people living around in this neighborhood, but also through research that this cultural institution did that supported us, actually it came out that people mostly wish for gardens, like allotment urban gardens. And so through that input, actually we made our very vague idea at the beginning, like common community-driven green space into urban garden project. And in that sense, we also wanted to find a balance between then bringing in gardening activity, gardens, and also this like spontaneous vegetation that was already existing in this place. So in a way, it became very fast clear to us when we came there that somehow we have to find some kind of a cooperation, and that also with actually, which is somehow, let's say, other than human, with other than human collaborators, and that also gardening as practice is actually a collaborative practice with also, other species. And actually, this perspective, this is an image. Here we are guarding the tree. They were so small that we were afraid that we would step on it and somehow destroy it. So we were marking some trees that were growing on the location. And this other than human perspective was also important for our colleague, artist and architect Polonca Lovšin. She, in first days that we somehow were present there, she made a project, a plan with a goat. So she was somehow spending a day closed with goat Hannah on the site and just following her activities and noting down her behavior, and based on that she made a plan how to organize this space, because when we entered it was like, so how we use this space, how do we plan it, how do we organize it? So this is her proposal. It didn't then happen in real. It was just her artistic comment on actually prevalent way of spatial planning that is very formal, very rational. And her kind of proposal was also, why not also playful and collaborative, and considering needs beside human, which also spatial planning often doesn't really acknowledge enough. So why also not to acknowledge needs of other species? So I will just, this was our invitation, even though the goat Hannah brought a lot of curiosity by the neighbors. Not many joined our first working actions, and actually our first community of gardeners took place next year, beginning of season, when we had our second round of communication and invited people to make your own garden. So people came, and this is how we started to plan and make the space very spontaneously. And this is a view on the garden a year later. And one of our community gardeners meeting. I also wanted to mention that somehow the context of the time that we started with the project, 2010, it was actually the year that at that time financial and real estate crisis hit Slovenia also, And so many construction companies went bankrupt, and this was also the story behind the site that we took over. So also I find it important to note that actually historically cities in crisis are connected to increase of urban gardening or allotment gardening. And Elke Krasny wrote a beautiful article in the book that we published at the end of our project, and I would like to quote. The title of her text is Listening to Gardening, Localizing the Planetary. So I quote, "Cities in crisis are marked by different kind of growth, not the construction of new buildings, technologies and infrastructures, but the growth of living beings, the growth of food." And also further on, she says, urban gardens were not only a direct response to a year of global economic crisis, but are also growing and living response to the conditions of climate violence that defines life on the planet. Understanding the distance that defines the relation between our kitchens and our gardens is part of understanding the conditions of climate change on the level of everyday life. Working on the closeness between our kitchens and our gardens is a feminist practice working for a new politics of ecologies of care. And I can really say from our practice experience that it was really this closeness of the garden to the homes of people super important, that the place was alive, and actually the garden was becoming more and more locally embedded in the years. At the beginning, people joined from different parts of the city and also out of Ljubljana because it was interesting for them. But actually the ones that stayed, they carried on, were really then at the end mostly people very closely somehow attached to this location. Yeah. So, the community was growing, the activities were piling, but the pressure of precarious condition of the caring infrastructure that was slowly growing on a former construction site was looming. And this was always our question: how a project of a temporary use of space can avoid gentrification process? How can a project of a temporary use of space have a long-term impact? Because we know from many examples recent in history that a lot of artistic cultural activities actually somehow paved the way to then refurbishment, gentrification projects, and this was always our concern, and this is somehow what was looming on every step that we were doing. Can we avoid that? And so we tried different things, but what we found very important is actually that we act, so we as initiators with interested people from the garden, participants from the garden, but also people outside that, so that we form alliances, that we are very active and engaging in public discourses, dealing with actually questions that were important for also and concerned this location, not just the question of food production and urban gardening and access to green spaces, but actually broader questions of how we live, how we can have a say into how the cities are developed and managed, and what kind of different understanding of growth can be beyond the understanding of developer-driven urbanization. So growing out of the garden, for example. So yeah, public discourse, forging alliances. Here, for example, we were hosting people from another city that were also just starting a community garden. Here, guided tours, Summer School of Political Ecology in Ljubljana. Here is actually audience gathering for the lecture of Elke Krasny 10 years ago on the topic of hands-on urbanism, the right to green. Guided tours in the city. This was on the topic of the trees and green in the city. Different cultural events. Workshop for women making their own furniture, different experiments. This was artistic, actually project dealing with microlife in soil and water, listening to the plants, listening to the accordion, listening to slam poetry. So using the space beyond gardening and beyond just people who had a key, because the space was still fenced, and it was important that we open up the space and we use it in the educational, political, cultural, artistic ways. And in that sense also to create an idea of a porous community, and not something that a community that is exclusive and homogeneous, you know, that you have this feeling of belonging in, but rather an idea of a community that maybe you feel affiliated with, so in a sense of relational situation or relational space, community also as a space. Site. So this was, important to step out also out of the garden itself. And also one important alliance we did was a network. It's called Network for Space, which involves different NGOs and local initiatives from Slovenia being active in social and social practices and policies. And through that also we were engaged in lectures, workshops, legal actually campaigns to change the legislative rules on the level of city, on the level of state, analysis, researches, and also all the time having a kind of vis-a-vis towards the city and involving them also in these activities, either in discussion or legislative changes proposal, because we wanted to make them accountable for the future of this site, which was on the one side really a symptom for this capitalist-driven city development, but on the other side, as in the way how we were trying to develop the place differently, also as a symbol of alternative vision to that. So these are the trees that we were guarding at the beginning, not to step on it, and then at the end somehow the trees overgrown us, and the place didn't really serve well anymore, for gardening purposes. And actually it didn't really work in this classical way of urban gardening, that it would be really a suitable place to produce food, because the conditions were not really optimal for that. The soil we had to brought on the site, because it was a abandoned construction site, it was just pebbles. We had to bring soil. It was always problem with the water, and then in the years the trees grew. There was more and more shadow, but the place became more and more valuable for the neighborhood, because in the light of the pressing climate crisis, it was really changing the microclimate also in the neighborhood. Yeah, so yes, just to mention before I finish now how the project ended. As I mentioned, that it was not like a typical like urban garden space, but mostly, yeah, it was space to learn not just about gardening, but also about actually the ways how to be together. In that sense, it was a community garden because we had to find ways how to coexist there, how to manage the space there, how to find agreements around that. So first, how to coexist between participants, but then also between us, their temporary guests, and also other beings living there, and then between the community garden and the public space, the neighborhood and the city. So it was basically a learning space for how to coexist and, yeah, find ways of be together. And then in 21, the municipality informed us that this is our last season because they have own plans for this site. And then in collaboration with participants from the garden and with the legal support of this network for space that we became members, we proposed to the municipality actually to change the status of the land, which was in the city spatial plan, considered to be how you say, to be built there. So to change the status into the green public space, which the municipality rejected, but they accepted our alternative proposal, which is not to sell the land, which was actually the plan from the beginning. And if there should be a construction happening, that the non-profit housing project should take place. And this is now actually happening in November. The City of Ljubljana Public Housing Fund will start construction. And what you see on the image is actually our goodbye action. We dig out some of the trees and replant them into the public space of Ljubljana. And we collected all possible plants growing there and distributed them to people which came. It was like several day action, so that the plants get new caretakers and the life goes on. So to conclude, even though this temporary project of temporary use of space could influence the future of this micro-location, and in a way show also that more inclusive city can grow out of the garden, out of the community garden. But if we look from the perspective of a city, the picture is quite sad actually, because spatial practices and politics of the city of Ljubljana over those years since we started became even more destructive and violent to human and non-human lives and well-being. But to conclude now with how I ended with noticing, I would like to just refer to Anna Tsing, American anthropologist and ecofeminist, who puts a lot of emphasis in her work to noticing, field work and storytelling. And actually in the book that she co-authored and was recently published with the title Field Guide to the Patchy Anthropocene, The New Nature, the authors write about noticing and storytelling as a feminist path. Just a second. noticing and storytelling, a feminist approach to the Anthropocene. So actually to understand, to learn, unlearn, and learn differently how human made changes and human influence changes into the environment actually impact and how the environment and nature, other species actually react on these changes. And yes, they propose noticing storytelling and storytelling as very important tools because they are both relational practices, like we considered our garden also as a relational practice and infrastructure, because noticing is actually an act of opening up and attuning to the world, to the environment around us in new way, and also storytelling as a relational practice that you translate your experience or transport your experience to others and relate through that to them. So even though the garden, as I showed you, is not there anymore, we continue with the garden project like that also by telling stories about this place and what happened and represented and meant to us. Thank you for now.
All right. Woohoo! It's wonderful to be the last one on Monday evening. I hope you're doing well. I present a project that works with different things, but I want to start with something that could be part of our project, and I would invite you to stretch a little bit. Like just, we're inhabiting this infrastructure. Let's move a second. A little bit of blood flow isn't the problem on this day, I think. Okay, so you can always feel free to move because it's up to you how you use your space. I will present the loop. A project. My name is Claudia Lomoschitz. Hello, everybody. I am working with research. I'm an artist. I work performative, and I work with choreography and video. And I present a project. I'm quite lucky. It's a project that is ongoing since 2020, and it's a project that I work collaboratively in with Elke Krasny and Sophie Lingg. So we have concluded several feminist nightscapes. Feminist Nightscapes is a walk format. So we walk with a group during the night and explore infrastructures, critically think about how infrastructures have been used, who do they exclude, and how can the night and the infrastructures of the night become a space for everybody, and especially Flinter people. That's our focus. So it's a long-term feminist spatial practice, and so our starting point was the idea of the feminist city. How could a feminist city look like, and how could a city look like that makes it possible for all bodies and genders to move freely and joyfully without fear of patriarchal violence. So that's like the first side. It's that's one nightscape walk, and sometimes we work with papers and we have printouts and we have scores. The night can be a space of urban violence, a space of injustice and also infrastructural injustice. And we ask ourselves, how can a city be non-ableist, non-classist, non-racist, non-sexist? And how can we imagine this? And how can we work towards it? And who works at night? And to work at night can also be performed by people that are often badly paid. And if we think of 24/7 infrastructures, it's a very unjust labor situation. Who cannot decide to not work at night? And I want to share. That's really not good. Okay, how to do that now? What to do? I have also a PDF that I could open. Maybe that's better because it would change everything. So stretch again. Okay, let's try this one. Could be better. Wie macht man das denn noch? Vollbild. Da, passt. Dup, dup. Okay, looks much better. It's a... Aha, interesting. So now we can read it, and I think that's great. So it's a score. Our practice works with different things. I don't know if you know scores. Just me saying, please stretch a little bit is already a score. But we sing together, we play on playgrounds, we listen to music, we scream claims. There's many different strategies that we use, like artistic methods. And that's one score that's about, I will just read it. When was the last time you had to stay up late at night to meet a deadline? When was the last time you needed to go to the emergency room at the hospital after midnight? When was the last time you rang the doorbell at the night pharmacy? When was the last time you took the first bus in the morning? This score is dedicated to all the essential workers who work at night and keep urban infrastructures running. We invite you to think of all the labor that is needed to guarantee the continuation of urban infrastructures during the night. So maybe you just think about it, like the last time you have done something at night 24/7, who did you encounter? Think about how it must feel to work at night. That's one score that I wanted to share. Okay, so we walk in a group through the city. I said everything. What we also do is we see us in solidarity to the Take Back the Night movement that various feminist activists work with since the 1970s. And there's some claims. And we sometimes read them aloud in public space with a group. And I thought I would love to read number 4 with you together. I read it first, and then you can see if it is something you want to read. It would be, we demand that no means no, regardless of race, religion, class, age, sexual orientation, sex, or gender identity. So, prepare yourself. If you feel like it would be very nice, I would not read it with the microphone, if we read it together and see how it comes about. Okay. We demand that no means no, regardless of race, religion, class, age, sexual orientation, sex, or gender identity. Thanks a lot. for participating. Yes, so that's also another photo. We do a lot of things, but I have to be honest, we don't take photos. We just never do that. So that's a few photos I can show you. Yes. So we do ask, how can women and non-gender conforming persons enjoy the night otherwise? How can the urban infrastructure be used playfully, imaginatively, creatively, without the risk of emotional and bodily violence? There's one other score that I thought I would like to share. And it is an imagination score that I will ask you to talk for 1 minute with your neighbor about. You choose the neighbor. Can also be a group. Imagine the night would be safe for everyone, always and everywhere. What would you like to do in public space? At midnight, at 4 in the morning, just before sunrise, alone or with a group of friends? Think about something that you would like to do right now. Like, sometimes there's things you don't dare to do them when you're alone. I don't know, night bathing in winter. There's different things. I don't know what's your desire. So think about it for a second, one thing maybe, and then share it quickly with your neighbor. Please. Okay. Woohoo! Thanks so much, everybody. I think, I will take 3 more minutes of your time, and I'm so happy if you afterwards talk with each other like this excited. It was so nice. I'm so curious to hear everything, but you're so many. Here you just see one scene that we did and a manifesto that we also wrote, and we also engage with writers and theorists and artists and look at decolonial, feminist and race-critical walk formats, and approach the city in honoring also bodies that have existed historically, traces that we don't hear. So we used also, speaking with Celia Hartmann, critical fabulation. So for the gaps, for the voices we don't hear, for the people that have been in this room, we sometimes think about them. We talk about their practices. How did women move through this street 100 years ago? How can a person nowadays move through this street with racial profiling and policing and so on? That's the last score that I prepared. And it's my favorite. Normally we start with it, but today I thought we all go into the city. I will read it in a second. We all go to the city, and it would be wonderful if you could take something with you. Before I go to this now, in the text that we wrote, we also put some scores. So if you look at our text, you find some more scores actually that you can take and perform with friends or with a group of people if you're interested. So this score is about imagine your body could grow a new feminist body part or organ that supports you at night in the urban infrastructure. Which feminist organ would you need? How does this organ support you? And what does your feminist body part look like? How would its consistency be? What would your feminist organ sound like? And how would it make you feel? Ideas like wings, a third eye, arm, like there's anything that you can imagine that you think like, that would be so great to have when you walk through later through the night. That's what I need, and it would really support me a lot. So maybe you can think about something that grows inside out. Is there like, are people having some imaginations? Nice. That's something that now I go a step further because I just like these things. Maybe the body part could make a sound. Maybe it doesn't need to, but normally we do this, then we would make a sound together. But I think I'm not gonna punish you so much more. So this is our website. If you're interested in the projects we did, and if you want to maybe do something with us, we can be invited also. We are happy to do that. And we work site-specific, so we invent something for every site new, and we look into the history of the site, and we make a walk. We also did digital formats where we worked in different cities, and people from many different places have been part. feministnightscapes.org, and then there is a wonderful playlist that I will start in a second, and then we go to the informal part. And on Instagram, we are called also feminist_night_scapes, if you want to find us. Yeah, you can. That's it. So we just decided that we start with informal part, and we're not going to have a Q&A, and you can ask us anything if you want, and you can have a drink and talk with each other, and I will start the playlist.
See the stars in the sky, see the rats out in the pond. Tell me that we're alright. see the stars.